Hey, I'm Coach T. It is the crack of dawn on a Saturday. This is week 42 of my C Sharp devlog, where I've been tracking my progress learning C Sharp and then applying that learning to starting to learn Unity over the last year. So we have 10 weeks left in this first season. Um, Not a lot going on this week, actually. I finished the design pattern course like 2 weeks ago. We had a lot of travel and family stuff going on, and then I basically kind of got bound up in a refactoring project. Originally, I was going to just roll through with what I knew and try to make a more vertical gameplay slice that was totally my own using the twin stick shooter logic and the twin stick shooter controls. But I started another GameDev.tv course on 3D combat and traversal, which is newer. I think it came out last year. But I didn't expect it to be about state machines. And I had just finished writing two of them on my own, which used monobehaviors, like the kind of the really ancestor class for Unity. It was a hybrid of the states sometimes manage their own exits and gate off when otherwise the state machine itself runs it. But the instructor made a really good series of arguments about why we shouldn't do that, and then also pointed out that technically, on the technical end, the monobehavior classes have additional overhead and setup time that can slow a game down. So with me only running a single character or 2 or 3 AI, maybe I'm not seeing it, but if I'm trying to run, 30, 40, 50, 100 AI, maybe I would start to feel a little bit of that impact. So I decided I'm not in a rush. I don't have a deadline. I don't even have an official project. Why not slow down and learn how to do the state machine using what he calls POCO states, or plain old command line objects, I think, or something like that, plain old C sharp objects. So I've been working on these POCO plain old C sharp states kind of all week, and it's the third iteration for me of this state machine, which is twin sticks. So, it's the same idea. Not touching the sticks, it would be in idle. Touching the the left stick, it would be single stick driven, and that would also control rotation. If I'm using two, then it would control rotation and movement. And then if I'm using a mouse, and because of the way that I'm writing it now, it'll detect if current device is mouse. Then it'll transition to allowing you to use radial aiming with ray casting to the ground. So same logic, same structure of cards in how the state machine works, but I had to figure out how to initialize those states without being reliant on monobehavior availability from the jump. The answer was something I had kind of forgotten just because I hadn't practiced it in so long. It was constructors. So I started by writing really heavy constructors where I was passing in kind of everything I thought that any of the states might need. A lot of them had very common needs, like the character controller, the state machine, the character sheet, etc., because they were pulling data from one or they were migrating data from another, not modifying, but like computing modified values based on one. And then I also decided, because I'm looking at modularity down the line, I want a character or a player to be able to compose a character. I moved all of the movement stats into a scriptable object, which is kind of like a configured file. So that was getting passed in, which had like move speed, sprint speed, which is a computed property, focusing speed, focusing rotation, sprint rotation. There are a couple other things too. I was passing like 6 things in each constructor into the base state, the move state, base state, and then calling them again in the individual concrete states implementations with their constructors. And that was working until I looked at his and I realized he's only passing in a reference to the state machine, because the state machine is the thing calling the constructors to create the classes. There's no reason for me to call the additional arguments in the constructors. I just had to make them public properties right there in the state machine. Boom. So the states are much leaner. I'll show them in a second. I can't tell if it's faster, but it feels faster. The one thing that really broke down and really dragged me down was my old system for calculating gravity and jumping does not work with this new system because the way that I am computing when states should manage and not manage has changed. Originally, my original idea was that when you jump, basically you would enter jumping, it would play the animation, and then you enter a fall phase where gravity would be steadily applied, but you'd have truncated versions, really stripped down versions of movement and rotational logic so that you kind of had a little bit of control while you were falling, but not a lot of control. And I found that since the state machine was no longer centrally governing the state management, that it was very difficult to get the value to be properly and expediently applied. So that was a big bummer. Oh, it's already open. Where's it open? There it is. That was a big bummer. And I spent like 2 evenings and 2 mornings working on that, and I would get it to a point where I could jump, or it would remember that I was jumping, but it wouldn't reset to fall. And that is a skill issue. I just could not figure out the algorithm or the structure, the architecture, to either get it to jump and to go upwards, right, to add velocity, and then to reset velocity, or when I did get it to work at various phases, to do it consistently. So there's some shortcoming in my own calculation there. And eventually I went back to the course, and 2 videos later, he has, the instructor, Nathan, has something called a force receiver component, which does more or less basically what I had him do, or what I was doing with gravity originally, but it's in one script rather than in the state machine, and it's consistently, continually applied. The frustrating thing is, like, almost down to the exact naming of things is exactly how I was trying to code it, but I think because the state machine kept switching states, it was interrupting that process. I think that's where my issue was. So I've got it working. This is a scene. It's very ugly. It's very plain, and I'm not going to keep this video very long. But this is using this. Oh boy, this is using the plain old C# states. You can see single state movement works. I have his rotation slow. I don't like the idea that you just instantly snap and pivot. It doesn't feel right to me, and I'm spending so much time learning about controls because I don't think a game can be fun if you have really bad controls. So I need the controls to feel right for me. Maybe that'll be a little too clunky for other people, but that's what settings in a menu are for. So right now it starts out pretty slow, the way that he rotates, and I have an animation eventually that I'll plug in to allow me to do that when, you know, the movement is below a certain level. Let's do a little bit of a pivot. He can't jump. Let me maximize this. It's maybe a little bit hard to see. I didn't even bother applying materials because I wasn't sure how long I was going to work on this. But here I am. I'm pivoting, and I can click because the mouse aiming is true. So all of that works. And if I step down to this plate, gravity worked, gravity worked, gravity worked. Right? The camera's not hooked up. Some of the features that I had coded before are just not there because I've been strictly focusing on the logic of getting navigation to work. So I think I'm going to stick with this. I don't know. I don't know how much of the original other project I'm going to rewrite, but I learned a lot about state machines muddling through this process. So it probably behooves me to go back and rewrite everything because I'm not on a deadline. I don't have, there's no rush for me pausing to do it, to learn to do it the right way. So that will improve modularity for me, I think, and I'm going to use more scriptable objects for things like configuration as we go. So that's it. It's been kind of a lean week, a lot of coding, but not a lot of progress. And sometimes failure means it's setting up the context in which you learn because you've figured out all the ways you can't do it. Now you're ready to see the way you can. So that's it. Short video update for week 42 here. I am going to get out of here, and I think I'm going to go make breakfast for the girls. So have a good week. Learn something cool. If you do, share it in the comments down below. I'm Coach T. If you like the kind of honest video diary and the slow approach to learning how to do fun things, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you next week for week 43. Adios.